Hi there, this is Ronnie coming at you with a video very early on a Sunday morning, but why not? I am doing a video response to John, the Red Dice Diaries. He did a video that got posted up last night about limits in RPGs. This was in response to a video from Samwise 7. So I thought I would sort of voice my views on limits. I don't actually disagree with anything that John said, so I'm just coming at it from my perspective. In terms of limits, one thing has always limited me: tone. Which is something John touched on. How I approach a very dark, sort of oppressive horror game, if I'm using something like Cult, is very different to how I will approach something using a sort of lighter tone, or games I run with a lighter tone, like Castle Falkenstein, which I run as a swashbuckler. If I'm running with a lighter system or a lighter tone, then obviously the subject matter and how much information I give and how specific I am with regards to kind of violence and so on tend to be a little, a lot lighter in touch. Whereas if I'm using something like Cult, quite frankly, the gloves are off. I do explain to my players prior to a game the tone I'm going for, and oft times the tone can be dictated by the system. That's not an absolute rule, but it tends. You're not going to find me running Cult as a comedy game, or as a kind of light, sort of frivolous thing. It just doesn't suit the system. Nephilim is another example. It's extremely dark fantasy, sort of dark urban fantasy, more accurately. So that's a major thing for me, is tone. It has to be tonally spot on for me. I certainly agree that as a GM you should be sensitive to players. You should ask them about areas that they're just not going to walk into in terms of content, subject matter. And give them the option. And I think if you are dealing with, I don't want to say adult content, because that has sort of, people immediately sort of think, porn. I rather prefer the term mature content. But if you are going to deal with mature content, first of all, you have to deal with it maturely. It can't be dealt with in a salacious or sort of frivolous manner. It has to be dealt with some seriousness. I think that's the thing with sometimes with mature themes, is that you have to deal with them with a relative amount of seriousness, rather than be sort of flippant with them. If you're running a game where one of the central story threads deals with something like rape or child sex abuse or something, then you just can't have that as a sort of light hook You got to deal with that, and the fact that there are real consequences and pain involved for the victims, and you have to be very, very sensitive in the way that you handle it in game. You also have to be sensitive to people who may be uncomfortable with that sort of subject matter, and if you have players who are all uncomfortable with that subject matter, then you really have to decide whether or not you are going to run that sort of game. There is an argument to an extent where one might claim that sort of pushing the boat out and sort of having players deal with that which makes them uncomfortable might be healthy or a good thing, blah blah blah. I'm not sure about that either way. I suppose in some cases the fact that they're uncomfortable with it could make for an interesting game, but personally I'm not comfortable with that. When all is said and done, it is a game. We are meant to be having fun, and if people are really uncomfortable with the subject matter, where they're simply not engaged with the story and engaged with the characters and sort of looking forward to the next session to see how this plot develops, how the story and the characters and everything act and react, then I think it's the point where you go, nope, this is not a good scenario for these players. It could be a superb scenario you've got, it could be a superb game, but it just might not work for your particular set of players or that particular set of players. But ultimately, when it comes to limits, those are the two. I think tone is almost more important for me than the sort of second one, the sort of players one, and the reason for that is that tone will decide first and foremost how dark or how specific in terms of content and ideas that you're actually going to get the players involved in. And then once you've decided on tone, then you can go to the players and say, right, this is kind of where I'm going. As an example, last year I did run a small scenario using True 20, and I specifically told them that it was going to be a dark one. It was dark, but I also had to be very aware of the fact that we were running the game on a Sunday afternoon in a gaming cafe where there were Magic tournaments and Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments and Pokemon tournaments and Force of Will tournaments and this, that, and the next thing. Ultimately, it was turny, and lots of kids around. And given all of that, I had to change the tone of. I had to I managed to make a dark game. Essentially the kind of game I would have used with Cult, but I couldn't bring Cult in because of the artwork. Essentially the kind of game I'd run with Cult, but I had to dial back a lot on the gore and the kind of brutality of it, and just deal certain things, provide enough information that the players could fill in the blanks. Without being frivolous about it, or being sort of flippant about the sort of horror that they were sort of facing. That was a challenge. It's not one I am eager to repeat, but you never know. So that's my thoughts. On no limits, and I'll be back soon with another video.